In this session we want to talk about survey methods and communicating with respondents. Now it's a fairly long class, so feel free to stop the class at any time, make your own notes, do some research based on the notes and return to it and pick it up from there. You'll note in the bottom right hand side of the slide number is indicated, so you'll know exactly where you got to should you want to stop the video and have a break or make some notes or whatever you want to do. So let's start. First of all, we're going to talk about communications and the research process. Now, the first thing we need to do here is to carefully compose the measurement questions. What are we going to question? What information do we require? And the information that is required should be posed as questions, and these should be very carefully worded and set out. It's also necessary to have the sampling issues resolved. In other words, what sort of sampling method will be used, how will the sample be selected, what size will the sample be, and what callback procedures will be in place in the event of missing somebody who was going to be interviewed, let's say. How will that person be contacted and finally interviewed? Now bear in mind here that sampling is only used as really a money-saving exercise. The best way to have information is to ask the whole population, whatever the relevant population is. So if we were doing a survey of student spending habits, we might want to talk to all the students in the country, but of course that's very expensive and very complicated, very logistically very difficult to do. So what we would do instead is take a sample of students, and how we draw up that sample is important, the sampling method, how it's selected, how many students we should ask, and they should be representative, of course, of the whole population of students. So issues surrounding sampling must be addressed and effectively communicated. The sampling instrument attempt to minimize errors and create respondent screening procedures. So with the sampling instrument, let's say it's a survey, the document should be free from errors. It should be piloted, it should be tested, and it should be checked, so that when it finally is used to collect the information that's required, it's error-free. There are no errors still in the document. So all the questions are relevant, they're all clear, and the respondent is clear about what has been asked. And related to this, of course, the interviewers should be properly trained. In the event of a respondent being confused by a question, the interviewer should be clearly briefed on what to do. So the interviewer should be trained in the use of that interview and of the interviewing instrument. So let's say the survey or the open-ended questions that were going to be used, or the scales, if it's an attitude issue, what scales will measure the attitude of the person towards something or in relationship to something. So the interviewer should be trained, that's the point. And finally, what are the data collection procedures? How are they going to be implemented? The data collection procedures may be to contact the people by letter or by email, or it could be going to their house, to their home and asking them, going to their workplace if that's permitted. So what are the procedures, and how long will the interview take, and what sort of excuse me, what sort of questions will be asked? In other words, How will the questions be asked? The questions may be asked in a variety of ways. It may be a very friendly exercise, or it might be quite formal. Depends on the nature of the survey. If the survey is about something very serious, then the interviewer will not be light-hearted and joking. So part of the interviewer's training will be to deal with the data collection procedures. Now let's look at personal interviews. Well, what are the requirements for success with a personal interview? First of all, the respondent must possess the required information. The person you're asking must have the information that is required. If you're doing a survey of people's attitudes towards climbing high mountains, then it's important that the person you're speaking to must have climbed high mountains. They must have some information. They must have the relevant information. If you're talking to somebody about their about procedures in managing fish stocks, then they must know about fish stocks. They must know about conservation. They must know about fishing and all aspects of that industry. They must have the relevant information. In other words, a personal interview is only effective if the person being interviewed knows about the topic. And the respondent must understand his or her role. The respondent must know that they are being interviewed and that the answers they give should be serious. They should be considered answers, not flippant answers or light-hearted answers. These should be carefully considered answers because it's important. And the respondent should be motivated to cooperate in the interview. They should want to cooperate. If they're not motivated to cooperate, they may give erroneous answers. They may give false answers. They may just give the first thing that comes into their head as an answer. It may not be considered. So if they're motivated, they will want to give good, reliable answers. Answers which are true and are considered and are reasonable. Now, the respondent's motivation to participate will depend on the belief that the experience will be pleasant and satisfying. So the respondent's motivation to participate will be based on a belief that the experience of participating in the interview will be pleasant and satisfying. It won't upset them. It won't annoy them. It'll be a pleasant experience. They should also have the belief that answering the survey is an important and worthwhile use of their time. They must value the time spent in answering the questions and consider that time well spent. It must be seen by them as a useful activity. They're not wasting their time. And if they have any reservations, they must be carefully allayed to one side. They must be dealt with. Any reservations about participating should be cleared up. The interviewer should have the training necessary to communicate the purpose of the interview, roughly what's going to happen during the interview, how long it will take, and ensure that the respondent is happy to participate. Now, the interview. Well, first of all, there should be an introduction to the interview. And in the introduction, there should be a good relationship established between the respondent and the interviewer. Then the data should be gathered, and there should be probing. If any questions are possible yes or no, then perhaps some probing questions may be used. But these would be sorted out before the interview, and the interviewer will have those probing questions to hand. So a probing question is prompting the respondent to go a little deeper and to make a decision between perhaps conflicting opinions. So probing means going a little deeper, so they're gathering the data in the interview. If the respondent's a little ambivalent, perhaps a little probing is useful. It's necessary to record the interview. This may be done by writing down accurately what has transpired during the interview. So recording the interview is important. It's a record of what's happened. And then to thank the respondent, being polite, thank the respondent and end the interview in an amiable fashion. Now the probing styles I mentioned earlier, well, these help with understanding and interest. So probing means asking questions not central to the interview, perhaps on the periphery, related questions, but it's just helping the respondent to understand what the question is, helping the respondent to understand the question and to generate interest in the question or to stimulate interest in the question. It's important that the questions are delivered in a well-spaced manner. They're not all rushed, that there is good pace to the questions that are being asked. One after the other, they are delivered not in a rushed fashion, in a gentle, easy, straightforward manner. It's important to repeat and explain any questions if that's required. The explanation should also be well rehearsed beforehand. If there is a question about the question, then the interviewer should be fully trained on how to explain the question and perhaps put it into different words if that's what's required. It's a good idea to repeat the respondent's reply to ensure clear understanding. So when the respondent gives an answer, the interviewer could repeat the answer whilst writing it down. And that way the respondent is aware that the answer given is what has been recorded. And also, of course, the interviewer is reinforcing the answer, making sure that is exactly what is meant. Now, problems with interviews. Well, the big problem is non-response error. Sometimes if people are selected for interview, perhaps they may not respond. And it depends really on the instrument that's been used. If people go to the house, they may get a response. It may be that people are not in. They've gone shopping or working. If the questionnaire is sent by email, it may go straight to the spam box and no response. If it's sent by email, it may go into the inbox, but it may not be responded to either. People don't have time, or there's too much. There are too many people looking for information. So non-response is a problem. Then there's misunderstanding and recording errors. That's why it's a good idea when interviewing sometimes to repeat what the respondent has said, so there is no misunderstanding. It's clear what's been meant. But sometimes there might be misunderstanding in the response and it's recorded wrongly. The interviewer may have errors as well. The interviewer might misread the question or pose the question in a manner which leads the respondent to give a particular answer. Body language may creep into it, and in asking the question the respondent is inclined to give a certain response because of the way the question was posed. And these are all interview problems. Let's look at telephone interviews. Well, the types of telephone interviews. Well, there could be computer-assisted telephone interviewing. Computer-assisted means the person asking the questions is reading the questions off a monitor, and the answers are streaming the next set of questions according to the answers. So it's going off on different branches depending on where the answers was taking the interview. A computer administered telephone survey, it's happening more and more, and companies seem to like it, but there is evidence of increasing respondent resistance to this. People do not like to have their evening meal interrupted by a survey on a telephone, and they don't like their numbers generated randomly and called randomly, cold calling as it's called. They may have other things to do. So it's not universally welcomed and gets some bad press. The problems, well, sometimes, as I said, respondents may be reluctant to participate. They don't want to be just telephoned and take up their time in this manner. So there is a high refusal rate, which is inefficient. It's an inefficient use of resources on the part of the company, but it's just generally annoying to a lot of people. So this type of interview has to be carefully considered and carefully administered. Let's look at self-administered interviews, which may sound a little complex, but let's look at the types. Well, it could be delivered but self-administered. So the questions, let's say, could be delivered to the house, and the people in the house, or the person in the house, would complete the document, would tick the boxes or write small comments. That's a possibility, so they can do it in their own time. For example, it could be a survey in the mail, a survey in the post. Now, there are disadvantages. It's a large non-response rate. People get it and see it as more spam coming through the door, so it gets binned straight away. There would be a large non-response error. People don't necessarily fill out everything that comes through the door. And the other disadvantage is cannot obtain detailed or large amounts of information. There's no opportunity to follow up on any of the answers. And the context in which the respondent was answering the questions cannot be taken into account. The respondent may be rushed, or the respondent may be in a bad mood, or the respondent may feel depressed about something. Or there's a whole series of situations that could colour or influence the type of answers that are being given. Now, ways to improve mail response. Well, the most obvious one is to reduce the length of the survey. Short surveys are more popular. People don't want to spend a lot of time answering long surveys. survey could be sponsored. There may be advantages to the respondent in completing the survey, such as free goods or entry into a draw for a car or a foreign holiday or something. So it could be sponsored in some way. Certainly they would need to have return envelopes. They're not going to pay for doing this, so return envelopes must be supplied, together with postage, of course. Ideally, the documentation should be personalised. They should feel it's coming to them, not a dear sir, dear madam. It should be dear Mr. whoever, dear Mrs. whoever. It should be personalised. And there are ways of using computer technology to do this, but care must be taken, because if it's obvious that this was generated by a computer, then that may alienate the respondents as well. They do like people to deal with them. Anonymity, well, anonymity means that they can respond and be sure that anything they say will not be held against them. They can be honest. If they don't like the product, they can say it. And their answers will be merged into all the other answers and will be taken out as an average response. But there's no repercussions for them from telling what they see to be the truth. The colour and size and reproduction of the documents that are sent. These attributes, size, colour, reproduction, really determine how professional the information is, or the information that's required. If the literature associated with the survey is very colourful and extra large print and desktop published in a very ornate fashion, then it may suggest that the information required is light-hearted. It's the respondent doesn't have to think too much about it. If it's more business-like, then the respondent may take it more seriously. There may be money incentives in completing a survey. Some people get paid, or they may receive bonus points, or they may be entered into raffles, as I said earlier, or be given some sort of incentive to respond. And there are many survey companies who have selected clients and selected respondents, a complete sampling frame perhaps drawn up, and some of the respondents do this almost professionally to get some money. It's important that there are deadline dates, because otherwise it may simply drag on and on. But the deadline dates should be realistic. Respondents can't always sit down immediately and respond. So deadline dates are important, but they must be realistic. And if they're too far into the future, then the whole exercise may be forgotten about and there'll be no response. A cover letter is always a good idea. It explains who the company is, what the purpose of the survey is, why the person has been selected and how the person was selected, and why that person's opinions are important. So a cover letter is always a good idea. Now, it is possible to outsource survey services, and research firms may be used for this purpose. For a start, they have a centralized location for interviewing, and they will of course have many years of experience and examples of good practice. But just taking one point at a time, they will have a centralized location for interviewing. They will have a place where it's been done in the past, and the ambience or the surroundings in which the interview may take place may have been carefully thought out and provided by the company. They may have focus group facilities, which other companies don't have, trained facilitators, and good equipment, efficient way of organizing group interaction and group responses, and looking at the outcomes in a very analytical and a very clear fashion, all derived from their experience of doing this in a specialized context. So they will have trained staff with experience, and that is important. They could also have data processing and statistical analysis capabilities that many companies may not have. Having collected the data, it's important that it's analysed, and many companies may not have the facilities to do that or the expertise to do it. So outsourcing it may be a good idea. They may have personnel with experience in specialised software or with academic qualifications in, say, statistics, which will be important in interpreting the data. They may have access to some data that others may not have access to. They may have purchased access to specialized data relating to specific markets. They may have contributed to Mintel reports, for example, or they may have an expertise in using government statistics in certain areas. And perhaps other companies would have access to it, but it would be a very costly exercise. It would be very difficult for them to do, so that outsourcing it would be a good idea. And of course they may also have panels in the sense of a list of people who are willing to cooperate in surveys, and these panels may be very large. It may be a very large database of people, and they can draw from these, and that gets rid of the non-response error. And they also get good responses from the people that they have on their panels, because they have been carefully selected over a long period of time. Now, I should say it was quite a long talk on surveying and interviewing and so on. So I expect you to have stopped the video many times, had a break, done some research, made your own notes, padded out your own notes. It is an important topic because it's a valuable source of primary information, primary data that companies do use. However, let's leave it for there now, and thank you for watching.